precepts and said, if we were to, look at your debts, you need to structure your economies such that you liberalize trade and finance, cut public service expenditure law, cut your subsidies, cut your wage bills, cut your expenditure in education, in health, and that the state must roll back, that we must sell our public enterprises, our parastatals. Alternatively, we must embark on contracting out and outsourcing, telling us, as if it was proven anyway, that efficiency is a function of ownership. And we know that the newly industrialized countries of Southeast Asia, their developmental trajectory has been a huge contrary to these orthodox economic precepts. We are told to let the market set the price at a huge cost to economies. We remember those days where the West, through the structural adjustment programs, nearly destroyed our economies. But because we are resilient as Africans, here we are still today. The example given on Namibia, it came as a result of the need to look into the loan contracts that are being signed. Most often than not, you may find that Parliament is in complete darkness in terms of what really the terms of the contracts are. Part of the terms of the contracts, members of TIFI, when discussing this matter, were of the opinion that when you look at the loans on the surface, in terms of what is usually told to members of Parliament, the loan will look very good. But when you delve beneath that facade, you may find that the debt servicing cost is actually huge when you compare it to the revenue that gets into the public purse. Hence, we say there's a need to also scrutinize and make sure that the debt servicing costs are reasonable to the extent that they don't dent the fiscus. That is the point that we sought to make. The point made by the Right Honorable from Namibia, that is not a bad thing, correct, and that what we use it for is what matters. In other words, there can be a bad debt and a good debt. I have been in my parliament, for instance, been one of the leading critics of borrowing to just say we are supporting the budget. But I've been of the opinion that there's a need to direct the loans to high-value projects, which can yield job creation, which can yield public goods that can, in the long run, support investment, both domestic and foreign investment, high-value projects that are of, big economic value. The critical point that also my colleague in Namibia mentioned, even though he didn't use these words, but is that issue of political business cycle, where you get into debt so that during the electoral cycle or during the election year, you appear to be doing a lot of projects. You want to appear like you are doing a lot of projects, and you overburden the country with debt in trying to get political dividends of continuing to be in power, without regard to the debt servicing cost, without regard to the debt to GDP ratio limits. And this brings me to the point which I made earlier in my speech about the exemption clauses, that member parliaments should also look at these exemption clauses where you'd say the debt ceiling, for instance, is 60% or 50% of the GDP, unless cabinet agrees, or unless the president sees fit, or unless so that the law doesn't appear to be giving a blank check, whereby at any point in time, any form of justification can be made, to increase the debt ceiling beyond what has been agreed or beyond what is in the law. So the onus is upon you, honourable members, to scrutinize these provisions in your various laws and see whether Parliament can be able to hold the executive to account. The idea really is for us as members of Parliament to be more empowered in terms of getting to know what these agreements really are, in terms of making sure that we play our role that we've been voted in for. Politics at the end of the day is about who gets what, why, when, and even maybe how. And as elected representatives, it is our mandate and to make sure that not only democracy presupposes that rulers are chosen by the ruled, but that they must also act in the interest of the ruled by making sure that they get what they demand us of. So parliamentary oversight has been overemphasized, and I cannot overemphasize that, Mr. President, that there's a need to have Parliament playing a more role in overseeing executive decisions of getting countries into debt. I thank you, Mr. President, and I thank you for the various comments that have come regarding this report. Thank you, Mr. President. I thank you, honourable members, for your attention.
Thank you, honourable member. I now put the question to the Assembly that the report of the Standing Committee on Trade, Industry, Finance and Investment on debt ceiling in SADC member countries be adopted. Are there any objections? There being no objections, the report of the Standing Committee on Trade, Industry, Finance and Investment on the debt ceiling in SADC member countries is duly adopted. Thank you. I will now ask the Secretary General, would you read the second order of the day?
Statement by Honorable Advocate Jacob Francis Nzwidamilimo MUDENDA, Speaker of the National Assembly of Zimbabwe, on decisions by the 290th session of the Executive Committee of the Inter-Parliamentary Union Assembly, which was held in Lisbon, Portugal, on 28th and 29th of June 2023, pursuant to Rule 45 of the Rules of Procedure.
Thank you, Secretary General. I will now invite Honorable Speaker MUDENDA to present the statement on decisions by the 290th session of the Executive Committee of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, held in Lisbon, Portugal, on 28th and 29th June 2023.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues and honorable members, it gives me great pleasure to share decisions of the 290th session of the IPU Executive Committee meeting held on the 28th and 29th June 2023 in Lisbon, Portugal. His Excellency Agostinho Santos Silva, Speaker of the Assembly of the Republic, officially opened the 290th session of the IPU Executive Committee. In his remarks, His Excellency Agostinho Santos Silva emphasized the central role of parliaments in advancing and upholding democracy through international solidarity and parliamentary diplomacy. He posited that given the diversity and representative role of parliaments, it was imperative to involve parliaments in addressing global challenges which include climate change, inequalities, and war conflicts. In this context, he commended the role of the IPU in international relations as it is an inclusive organization that draws membership from all the global geopolitical groups. Mr. President, the IPU Executive Committee was privileged to pay a courtesy call on the head of state, His Excellency Marcelo Rebelo de Souza. The head of state wished the IPU success in championing its parliamentary diplomacy and attending to global challenges affecting humanity. The President opined that no country was an island in the global village and espoused multilateralism as an anchor of international solidarity and international relations. His Excellency stressed that parliaments were revered citadel of democracy as the only institution which represents the voice of the voiceless. Mr. President, the IPU Executive Committee witnessed the parliamentary session in the Portuguese National Assembly as part of the parliamentary engagement of the IPU Executive Committee. The outcomes of the 290th session of the Executive Committee are as follows. IPU regional offices. The Executive Committee took note of the progress report as presented by the Secretary General. Guided by the decision of the Governing Council taken in Manama, Bahrain, on the occasion of the 146th Assembly of the IPU and the related meetings, the Secretary General concluded negotiations on the host agreement between the government of Uruguay and the Uruguay Parliament and the IPU. Accordingly, the IPU Executive Committee witnessed the historic signing of the agreement to cater for the Africa and Arab regions equally. The IPU Executive Committee members applauded the positive strides made towards launching the pilot regional offices. Furthermore, Mr. President, the Executive Committee implores the Secretariat to ensure the same level of quality of the service provided by the main IPU offices to be maintained at the regional level. Then preparations for the 147th Assembly of the IPU and related missions in Angola. Mr. President, the Executive Committee took note of the advanced state of preparedness for the hosting of the 147th Assembly of the IPU and related meetings in Luanda, Angola. The following key issues were highlighted. The Assembly will be held under the overarching theme, and I quote, parliamentary action for peace, justice, and strong institutions, unquote. Accordingly, Mr. President, the host parliament and the IPU Secretariat were in the process of identifying high-level personality and expert guests to address the Assembly in line with the theme. Furthermore, in line with the objective of the obtaining universal membership of the IPU, invitations were being extended to non-member parliaments to participate during the Assembly and subsequently become members of the IPU. The host country, Angola, has issued visa guarantees for all delegates attending the Assembly. Visas on arrival will be issued to delegates from countries where Angola does not have diplomatic representation. Measures have been put in place to guarantee security of all delegates. the host parliament has negotiated special rates with hotels that are within the radius of the venue of the assembly. Furthermore, Mr. President, the host parliament will have a dedicated website for the assembly deliberations in due course. The executive committee was satisfied with the state of preparedness of the hosting of the 147 assembly of the IPU. The presidents of the Forum of Women Parliamentarians and Youth Parliamentarians briefed the executive committee on their planned activities for the 147 assembly of the IPU and related meetings. Because their presentation is quite comprehensive and elastic, may I refer colleagues and members to the IPU portal for the Assembly for the comprehensive agendas of these meetings as presented by the two. Crima Passe Prize. In tandem with the amended rules for the Crima Passe Prize, the Secretary General updated the Executive Committee on the nomination process of the Crima Passe Prize by highlighting that a total of 10 nominees had been received. 4 nominees were disqualified for various reasons, with the remaining 6 being admissible. Of those 6, 2 are alternatives. The selection board is scheduled to meet on 3rd July 2023 to evaluate the submissions and choose a winner. The board comprises of past presidents of the IPU from all geopolitical groups. Eurasia did not nominate a representative to sit on the board. The Africa Geopolitical Group then nominated Mr. Milegu Traore, a retired speaker from Burkina Faso, to join the board. The winner of the prize will be announced during the 147th Assembly of the IPU in Angola. Mr. President, the Executive Committee took note of the Secretary General's report on the revision of the IPU statutes and rules. All IPU member parliaments have an opportunity to make proposals for possible amendments to the IPU statutes and rules. A note was circulated to all member parliaments in this regard, with the deadline for submission being set for 1st September 2023. After that date, no proposals will be accepted. A working group may be established to examine the proposals and make appropriate recommendations to the executive. This will be a consultative process with the involvement of all geopolitical groups. In this context, I wish to encourage SADC parliaments to take part in this process. In the election of the IPU president, Mr. President, the Secretary General briefed the Executive Committee on the procedure for electing a new IPU president. He advised that the election will be conducted in line with Article 19 of the IPU statutes, particularly Rules 6, 7, and 8. The election will be conducted on the 27th October 2023 on the occasion of the 147th Assembly of the IPU and related meetings in Luanda, Angola. To date, 4 candidates have been received as follows from the Africa Geopolitical Group. Number 1, Honorable Megane Kanouté, Member of Parliament and Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Senegal. Number 2, Right Honorable Dr. Tulia Ackson, Speaker of the Parliament of Tanzania. Number 3, Right Honorable Catherine Gutani Hara, Speaker of Parliament of Malawi. And number 4, yours truly, Honorable Advocate Jacob Francis MUDENDA, Speaker of Parliament of the Republic of Zimbabwe. The profiles of these candidates have been uploaded onto the IPU website for reference. The outgoing president of the Advisory Group on Health, Honorable J. Achandanizi of Spain, made a passionate plea for the creation of a substantive standing committee on the health within the IPU. Mr. President, on the celebration of the International Day of Parliamentarianism, on the 30th June 2023, members of the Executive Committee joined several speakers of Parliament from across the globe and other dignitaries in celebrating the International Day of Parliamentarism, the date the IP was founded 134 years ago. The International Day of Parliamentarism was established in 2018 through a United Nations General Assembly resolution. To mark the celebrations, the IPU president, 7 speakers of parliament, including Honorable myself, Honorable Caroline Ketire, Speaker of the National Assembly of Angola, Honorable Rodrigo Pacheco, Speaker of the Federal Senate of Brazil, Honorable Juan Antonio Coloma Correa, President of the Senate of Chile, Honorable Silvia Jacopo, President of the Latin American Parliament, Honorable Beatriz Agimoni, President of the Senate of Uruguay, and Professor Saidov of Uzbekistan, who is also an IPU Executive Committee member. Reflected on the milestones achieved by the IPU and the challenges facing humanity, food insecurities, gender inequality, and youth empowerment, among other issues discussed. Furthermore, the speakers emphasized engaging in dialogue as the best way of resolving conflicts in the world. I so submit, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker Mudenda, for the statement. Secretary General, would you please read the next order of the day?
Motion for the adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources.
So, excuse me, the honorable member from South Africa wanted to intervene before the next motion.
Chair, thank you very much. We have been given what is a very good and comprehensive report. If I may, there was
members of our organization, we had at EXCO, I remember, and no decision was taken. It was referred to this assembly to debate the issue. It is now strange that we are now in front of this situation. Now, from the 4 candidates, Mr. President, and so we are giving the possibility for Senegal because she is the only one in that particular region. That's why it would be common sense that we should be try to debate here so that we can try to reach consensus from the region in order to try to compete with the other regions, sub-regions in equality of circumstances. We really want our candidate to be the winning one. And so, if you will allow speakers, we are actually handing over the possibility of just being defeated from this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I am quite open to a debate on the subject, but in accordance with the rules, we need to do it on a motion. And I think there is a possibility for bringing a motion to the Assembly so that this can be done. So with your understanding, I would recommend that we proceed in that way. Thank you. Madam Secretary General, please move to the next order of the day.
Motion for the adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources on the situation of hunger and food insecurity in the SADC region, challenges fueling food insecurity, major international goals and Africa agenda, investment and performance of the Malabo commitments and environment that can attract the youth to invest in agriculture.
Thank you. I invite the Honorable Ismail Ndaila Onani, Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources, to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and good morning, and good morning to my dear colleagues. Mr. President, I beg to move that this plenary assembly do adopt the report of the SADC-PF Standing Committee on Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources to the 53rd plenary assembly session of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, laid on the table on the 4th of July, 2023. Mr. President, the committee draws its mandate from Article 15 of the Constitution of the SADC-PF.
Honorable member, before you proceed on your motion, may we have a seconder, and then you will be able to proceed. Do we have a seconder for the motion? The honorable member from Tanzania.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Hawa Subira Mwifunga, Member of Parliament from Tanzania. Mr. President, I beg to second on the motion for the adoption of the report of the SADC-PF Seconding Committee on Food, Agricultural and Natural Resources. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. I now call on the Honorable Onani to present the report.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, the committee draws its mandate from Article 15 of the Constitution of the SADC-PF as read together with Rule 42, subsection C of the Rules of Procedure. Pursuant to its mandate, as enriched in the aforementioned provisions, the committee met on Tuesday, 9th of May, 2023, to deliberate on the situation of hunger and food insecurity in the SADC region, challenges fueling food insecurity, major international goals and the African agenda, investments and performance of the Malabo commitments, environment that can attract the youth to invest in agriculture. Mr. President, the committee benefited from highly qualified and experienced resource persons who made valuable recommendations, which helped to shape the recommendations that this committee is making to the Plenary Assembly today. Further, Mr. President, in the course of its deliberation, the committee was apprised that agriculture sector is critical to SADC regional development, as about 70% of the Southern African population depends on it for livelihood opportunities in terms of both employment and income. In addition, the committee noted that agriculture sector could alleviate poverty 11 times more than any other sectors, including oil, gas, and mining services. However, the sector is greatly affected by the negative impact of climate change and extreme weather events such as cyclones. Mr. President, furthermore, the agriculture sector contributes to rural development and creation of job opportunities, especially for young people, women, and other vulnerable social groups. This calls for all member states to prioritize sustainable agricultural practices, among other measures that are meant to boost agriculture in the region. Mr. President, regarding food insecurity projections, the committee was disheartened to note that 41 million people in 10 countries are likely to face hunger in 2023. The countries include DRC, Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia, Madagascar, Zimbabwe, Angola, Tanzania, Namibia, and Eswatini. This calls for member states to dedicate more effort towards fulfillment of their commitments on agriculture and food security, including the following: Sustainable Development Goals, number 1 and 2, on ending poverty and hunger, respectively. The African Agenda 2063, Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, and the 7 Malabo commitments. Mr. President, regarding the performance of SADC member states, as per Malabo Biennial Review Report since 2019, all SADC countries have been performing poorly, as no country in the region is reported to be on track to achieve these critical commitments. This can be attributed to inadequate financing towards agriculture and challenges such as climate change, COVID-19, and the conflict in DRC and Mozambique, and of course the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Be that it may, it is important to be mindful that the quest to overcome the challenges in the region, SADC member states do not end up being overburdened with debt. Mr. President, the committee further recognizes that access to clean energy is a fundamental human right. In view of this, the committee recognizes the need for SADC parliamentarians to encourage SADC citizens, especially those in rural areas, to use clean energy such as solar and gas, as the use of charcoal and firewood destroys forest resources, which are a source of both food and finance. In addition, the use of charcoal and firewood fuels gender imbalances, since more women than men are involved in the collection of the same. Mr. President, with regard to fertilizers, the committee recognizes that fertilizers are increasingly out of reach for ordinary citizens due to high costs. As a result, farmers opt for organic fertilizers that are not always effective, resulting in low yields. This calls for all member states to seek alternative sources that can supply cheaper fertilizers that are also eco-friendly. Mr. President, on the working visit to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, the committee is highly appreciative for the insightful engagements and interactions arranged with different stakeholders, including the Standing Committee on Energy and Petroleum of the National Assembly of Venezuela. During the visit, the program for the working visit was well planned and coordinated by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of that country through its mission in Windhoek, Namibia. Mr. President, sir, given this deliberation, the observation the committee recommends to the 53rd Plenary Assembly to 1. Call on SADC member state members of parliament to demonstrate willingness to deal with food insecurity, hunger issues by making progress towards allocation of 10% of their discretionary budget to the agriculture sector in order to progressively fulfill the Malabo commitments. 2. Encourage member states to ensure that SADC citizens, especially those in rural areas, have access to clean energy such as gas and solar, as to eliminate the use of unsustainable sources of energy, such as charcoal and firewood, which indiscriminately destroys forests. Such as destruction not only results in environmental instability, but also destroys a safe source of food. 3, prompt member states to opt for clean energy and avoid sources of energy such as charcoal and firewood, which are associated with gender discrimination through their collection and distribution streams. 4, urge member states to seek cheaper alternative sources of fertilizers such as small-scale farmers can afford to buy, thereby improving crop yields. 5, urge SADC parliaments to develop national and regional joint agricultural review platforms. 6, urge SADC member states to leverage on the actualization, the potential job creation from the agriculture sector by investing in the sector, as it is critical to support economic growth and reduce poverty and food insecurity. 7, call on SADC member states to adopt a gender-balanced right to food and nutrition framework in all future reviews of policies and strategies. 8, further call on SADC member states to ensure that the GDP generated from agriculture sector be utilized involvedly to reduce the debt overhang and the overall borrowing of the government. 9, call on SADC member states to institute deliberate measures to engage with Venezuela in the political, social, and economic atmosphere. 10, employ SADC member states to cultivate closer collaboration with Venezuela, especially in the mining and oil sector, in order for SADC member states to benefit from the country's experience and expertise in these sectors. 11, engage SADC member states to take advantage of the opportunity to expose their various technocrats to the planning proposals and processes for successful economic diversification in Venezuela. 12, further employ SADC member states to explore and take advantage of the possibility of exposing young SADC citizens to technical training in Venezuela through various technical and vocational programs. 13, urge SADC national parliaments to establish friendship association to facilitate interaction among the parliamentarians of the SADC region and those of Venezuela. 14, place on record its gratitude to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in Namibia for its continued collaboration with the SADC Parliamentary Forum, which culminated into the working visit by members of the Standing Committee on Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources. With the aforesaid, Mr. President, allow me to reiterate that since the agriculture sector has the potential to greatly influence the development trajectory of individual SADC member states and entire region in general, a regional approach to investing in the sector and in food systems is critical to supporting economic growth and reducing poverty and food insecurity. Let me conclude by expressing the committee's gratitude to the Secretary General and the staff of the SADC-PF for the tremendous work which culminated into this report. The committee further extends its appreciation to all resource persons for rendering valuable input which helped to shape the report before this August House Assembly today. Mr. President, I beg to move.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for the presentation. I shall now allow the seconder, Honourable Hawa Subira Mwaifunga, Vice Chairperson of the Committee, to present the seconding speech. Honourable.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to support the motion on the report of the Standing Committee on Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources, which has been so ably moved by Chairperson Honorable Ishmael Indaila Onani. I concur with the mover of the motion that the agriculture sector plays a key role in socio-economic development of SADC region. It provides a livelihood, including subsistence, employment, and income, particularly for the majority of the people living in rural areas. According to the SADC Statistic Yearbook 2015, agriculture contributed approximately 20% of the region's gross domestic product in that year. Mr. President, it is widely recognized that women play a significant role in agriculture in the region, yet they face enormous challenges that hinder their full potential as farmers. According to the SADC Food Nutrition Security Strategy, women also play a critical role in ensuring food and nutrition security. The strategy indicates that in SADC, women contribute more than 60% to total food production and provide the largest labor force in the sector. In some member states, women perform more than 70% of work in the agriculture sector. However, they are usually excluded from many decision-making processes. At regional level, significant attempts are being made to mainstream gender in regional instruments. However, implementation is generally weak. This, therefore, requires deliberate efforts to enhance implementation of gender mainstreaming commitment at both national and regional levels. Mr. President, the strategic position in which parliamentarians sit is fundamental to promoting enhanced public investment in the agriculture sector, such as provision of public goods and services, including infrastructure, energy, research and development, especially in rural areas. Such investments can also contribute to the emergence of the conditions present to increase private investment made by smallholders, youth-led and women-led, small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, and by larger-scale agribusiness investors, while ensuring well-defined safeguards are in place to protect legitimate interests and prevent damage to the environment and communities. Mr. President, in supporting the motion, let me also highlight the nexus between the agriculture sector and sexual and reproductive health and rights, recognizing that agriculture productivity is impacted by gender-based violence, GBV, and limited access to sexual reproductive health and rights, SRHR. It is imperative for SADC countries to sensitize farmers about SRHR and GBV. Globally, the research shows that women agriculture workers experience high level of violence and harassment by supervisors and colleagues in the field. HIV has also impacted this sector highly as a result of gender inequalities. In light of the above, SADC parliaments need to stiffen laws on SRHR and GBV in order to deter perpetrators of the vice. This will help protect farmers who may become victims of GBV. Finally, Mr. President, I wish to reassert that SADC member countries must be seen to be making an effort to progressively fulfill the Malabo commitments by allocating 10% of their discretionary budget to the agriculture sector. This is an imperative that will be highly beneficial to all SADC member states. Mr. President, I second the motion. Thank you. Asante sana.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I shall now allow debate on the motion. Members will please indicate by a show of hands if they wish to take the floor. Please hold your hand while we take note of the members who wish to speak. And I will start with the Honorable Member from Malawi.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Firstly, let me congratulate the mover and the seconder of the report. Well summarized and well presented. Mr. President, I want to be schooled on the criteria the committee used in finding the countries that will be struck by hunger this year. I'm asking this question because I'm really surprised that Tanzania is on the list Yet, 2 days ago, we heard all the efforts and programs that Tanzania are doing in making sure that the country is food sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will recognize a member from South Africa.
Thank you very much, Honorable President and the leaders of various delegations. South Africa support the important report presented by the chairperson of the committee, which underscores the urgency of addressing the issue of food insecurity in the SADC region. Recent global events have made it clear that we have a long way to go in the fight against food insecurity and hunger, which continues to cause enormous damage and undoing much of the progress that we have made over the years. South Africa, like most countries in the region and the continent at large, believe that agro-processing plays a crucial role in ensuring food security, improving the well-being of our communities and driving job creation within our nation. Agro-processing means taking the wheat we grow and turning it into different foods. This is important for making sure that we have food for fighting hunger, poverty, and ensuring that we have food for everyone. By processing wheat, we can make sure that it lasts longer, wastes less, and make it more nutritious. We should, as a country, I think, follow pointed recommendations that are made by the report. And in this regard, we welcome one of the plans that the country is introducing on agro-processing master plan, which we believe that this plan provides a roadmap for making agriculture sector more competitive through innovations in technology and improving infrastructure and embracing digitalization, as well as generating employment opportunities, particularly with youth and women. And lastly, we agree with the chair on an important issue that critical to the existence of the regional, continental, and global multilateral parliaments, forums like SADC. Two critical issues stand out, that role of parliaments as apex institution of democracy, giving expression of the electorate with regards to issues of peace, global politics. The issue of Venezuela was a much more necessary that we, as a committee, visited Venezuela. As we speak today, the people of Venezuela, with huge economic potential in petroleum and gas, continue to be subjected to economic sanction and blockade by the United States of America. This is similar situation to our brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe. So we should be working as SADC, not just about the existence to establish a friendship and solidarity, but we also must isolate issues of cooperation and trade that we need to engage with vigorously as progressive forces in SADC. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. I will recognize the first member from Zambia who raised a hand.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I wish to commend my able chairman for presenting the report so ably. Mr. President, generally, achieving food security in its totality continues to be a challenge for developing countries. One of the means of safeguarding food security lies in having a productive agricultural sector. In this case, Zambia has made some progress in improving the policy environment in the agricultural sector. However, the agricultural sector has not been operating optimally due to some challenges. For instance, even though Zambia is relatively able to produce enough staple food to feed its population, the country has been facing temporal food insecurity issues. This is evidenced by a sudden drop in the ability to produce due to climate change, pests such as fall armyworms and other crop diseases. Further, short-term shocks and fluctuations in food availability and food access, including year-to-year variations in domestic food production, food prices, and household income, negatively affect food security targets. One of the outcomes of food insecurity is the triple burden of malnutrition, undernutrition, that is, overnutrition and the micronutrient deficiencies, which remains significantly high. In 2018, the country recorded 35% of children under 5 years being stunted, and 12% of children under 5 were underweight. Mr. President, some of Zambia's agricultural interventions in improving food security include transforming farmer input support program into, which we used to call FISIP, into comprehensive agricultural transformation support program. Promotion of investment in agricultural research and product support. Promotion of investment in farm block development in all the provinces of Zambia. And this one, this is where you find most youths, who have been, inducted in this program of food production. Investment in the agriculture extension system. Investment in rural and peri-urban infrastructure, creation of an enabling environment for public-private partnership in agriculture, enhancing the mechanization of the agriculture sector. Mr. President, the Zambian Parliament has enacted relevant pieces of legislation to facilitate for a productive agricultural sector and food security, which include the Food Reserve Act number 6 of 2020, the Food and the Nutrition Act number 3 of 2020, the Food Safety Act number 7 of 2019, and the Dairy Industry Development Act of number 22 of 2010. Mr. President, Parliament has also been closely monitoring and interrogating the major international goals and the African agenda investments and the performance of Malabo commitments. This is mainly done through our active Parliamentary Committee on Agriculture and the vibrant Parliamentary Caucus on Food Nutrition. Mr. President, I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable member, I recognize a member from Botswana.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mine will be short, but what I'll say, I'm Assistant Minister of Local Government, also a Member of Parliament from rural areas. That's why I want to chip in, especially with the food security, because where I am from, mostly we are farmers. And the main thing, agriculture is like they said, the report is good. I really support the report, really. And I say congratulations, team. And agriculture is very critical to reduce poverty and unemployment. But there are lots of challenges, especially with Botswana. Yes, of course, climate change and fertilizers and seeds due to the Ukraine, Russia. And COVID-19 also has really affected us in our country. But the main thing with the food security, whereby our government has to look at it, is low budget. We have to really put a lot of money in agriculture, at least to have a very good food security, especially when you look at infrastructures, communication, because, you know, normally youth, they like very good communication. For them to go to the farms, there has to be a very good communication. And when I come to, especially with our country, SMME, they face a lot of challenges because of funding. The committee said a lot about GBV. Women are mostly working in farms, Mr. President, and they are facing a lot of challenges. They are harassed on the way when they are going to the farms because they are working, going to the farms, and also they get that challenge, especially at work at the farms. They are harassed. But with our government, because I'm in the local government ministry, what we have done is that, of course, we want mostly our women are single parents, mothers. So what we have done is that we have done the hostels for the kids, whereby we took the kids so that mothers can go to the farms, and we have got hostels so that kids can go to the school at the boarding schools, so that mostly they can work just to reduce unemployment in women. That's why I want to chip in so that other countries also can look at it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I have a member from Malawi. No, I will recognize a member from the DRC.
Merci, Président, pour la parole.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. Yeah, I don't have anything much to add because those who took the floor before me have already discussed the issues I wanted to raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member, for giving the floor. I have members from Zimbabwe. Honorable Member, yes.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. First, I would like to thank the chair for a job well done in presenting the report, as well as the seconder. I also want to thank the honorable member from South Africa on pointing out the adverse effects of sanctions. Mr. President, I was part of this historic mission to the Republic of Venezuela from the 29th March to 4th April 2023. I will not repeat the main objectives of the working visit, but indicate that we were fully capacitated with the knowledge on how to effectively tackle the energy problems. This can be used to tackle the problems we are facing in the SADC region. Mr. President, what struck our hearts most is that as part of the revolution in Venezuela, ordinary citizens are empowered to take charge of their lives, even under economic blockade. Venezuelans show that they have the responsibility to take charge of their lives. The people of Venezuela, through local community groups and traditional leaders, work hard to ensure that they achieve food security and improve their livelihoods. Across the country, you can actually feel that there is a thread of patriotism that runs through the minds of the people of Venezuela. I do hope more delegations can visit Venezuela to see and listen for themselves on how a nation can work together to improve their livelihoods and tackle illegal sanctions. With these few words, Mr. President, I support the report. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. Before the other member from Zimbabwe, I will recognize the member from Tanzania.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My name is Shirley Raymond, Member of Parliament from Tanzania. May I start by commending the presenter and the lady who, Honorable Hawa, who supported the motion. Mr. President, this is a very important report. And before I comment anything, I would just like to remind all of you, there's one very famous prayer, and we all wake up asking God to give us our daily bread. And we are all seated here. We are looking for our daily bread for ourselves and the people we are representing. So when it comes to agriculture, there's no way we can stay aside, not really putting more effort and see that things are done properly, and all countries are farming for the betterment of their people and all those who will come after. All of us here will pass, but our daughters, our sons, our grandchildren will still be there, and they will all talk of SADC. What did we do? How did we improve the agriculture way of our area? And this is SADC. All of us here, majority are farmers. Our countries are farming for ourselves and maybe few for export. One thing we need to do is to add value. When we get all that, when we are going for trading, we should not trade the bulky things. We should add value for whatever we harvested from the farms. And that will bring more money or more cash to our crops. It's only men. They are called male crops. And the women are only planting those small, like, well, groundnuts, vegetables. Those are female crops. Now I'm requesting, Mr. President, how is SADC going to assist women to own land, to plant all those cash crops and feel that we are farmers? Here as we are seated, men only think of themselves. And when it comes to feed the house, feed the family, it's the little which the mother brought inside is going to feed the family. How is SADC going to assist? Mr. President, if I may just request you, it is well said, struggle for existence, survival for the fittest. We are all here struggling to add value, struggling to get more, and struggling to see that SADC will be heard more well. How are we going now to support what our Honorable Ismail just presented and see that we come up with with one voice of the Malabo agreement, commitment that 10% of the budget of any country should go to agriculture. Much has been said since yesterday or the day of the opening, but still we all need to struggle. Mr. President, you have seen that when it comes to climate change, women are more affected. And when women and all the farms are affected, it's also a problem of women. I pray for this, and I request you, Mr. President, to see that women get more access to farms and women get more support, starting from fertilizer, going to farms, good seeds, and all which can enable all of us to be in a better position. Mr. President, I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I have another member from Zimbabwe. Thank you. I will move to the member from Zambia. Thank you. I may have overnoted a member from Tanzania. Okay. I have a member from Namibia. I have two members from Namibia. We'll take three. I have a third member from Namibia. Thank you. The first member who raised the hand, please, from Namibia.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. I think we should consider it common cause and right now that agriculture is important. And the honorable member from Tanzania who spoke before me just indicated to us that most of us here are involved in agriculture. I would assume that is the truth, or at least in one way or another, our backgrounds are that of agriculture. Now, I here speaking, I'm also a farmer in Namibia. And if in Africa we say land and our human capital are our common denominators, then surely as SADC, as African nations, we should come to a decision to have a joint agricultural development plan. I'm here echoing the words of the Minister of Agriculture from Tanzania when he was saying we should have conversations with one another, look at each other's strengths and weaknesses, and complement one another. But I dare say our plan in terms of agricultural development should go beyond that. Infrastructure. How do we ensure that once we have produced, we are able to trade with one another effectively and efficiently, to get products to one another in a much faster and a much cheaper way? I have learned that between Tanzania and Zambia, there's a railway. How about ensuring that our rail network within the SADC region makes trading with one another in terms of agricultural produce and product possible and efficient? You look at other countries and other continents such as Europe, the movement of people between even an island, as it were, Britain and mainland Europe, is made possible because of a fast-moving trade. Maybe our plan as Africa, as SADC, should go beyond what are we going to do with our land to how should we ensure that we jointly build infrastructure that will enhance our agricultural sector. That leads me to the next point. In Namibia, we are a very big country compared to our population. 800,000 hectares to 2.76 million people now. But one of our problems is water. And I believe our colleagues in Botswana, our neighbors in Botswana, would also empathize with that problem. So how do we ensure that countries with abundant water, like Zambia, Botswana, Angola, can assist the countries that doesn't have. One of our solutions in Namibia that we should have is desalination, because we are not a landlocked country. Unlike the others, we have the sea. But we are not desalinating enough for the purposes of producing and using our desert to produce. Because we can produce grapes that we as Namibia are not doing optimally. We can produce dates that we are not doing optimally. These are all things, if we as SADC decide to come with a joint plan as to where we are going to get, say for instance, our dates, our grapes, like I've mentioned, we can assist one another with. And that, in my view, ties in with what the previous speaker have indicated. Agriculture, I've just indicated that I'm a farmer. Agriculture does not work without subsidy. It does not. We are competing with the rest of the world, and the rest of the world is subsidizing the agricultural produce. But the African farmer puts his produce on the market without or with the bare minimum help from our governments. You would realize that those of us who are supposed gainfully employed, if politics were to all employment, but those others who are employed in other sectors, you would realize that their agricultural activity are naturally doing better than those who are just subsisting from agriculture. Why? Because even when government is not subsidizing, people are subsidizing their agricultural ventures from their own pockets, and I suppose salaries, those who are part-time farmers. So it is important that we heed to the call and that we craft, I suppose, a model policy or model law, a SADC-PF, that dictates to our governments to use an X percentage of our GDPs towards agriculture. Without that concrete step taken, and if we leave the need to subsidize our agricultural sector at the whims or at the mercy of every government, we politicians are supposed, or I'm afraid, specialize in making it...
Please conclude, Honorable.
Yes, I'm concluding. We specialize in making it look like we are doing something when we are actually doing the bare minimum. When we are addressing the issue of agriculture, we must be genuine and actually be doing what we need to do. Otherwise, we'll be postponing hunger, we'll be postponing poverty for future generations to deal with. The time is now to deal with this, and subsidies, in my considered view, is the way to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will take the second member from Namibia.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to echo the same sentiments given by my colleague in terms of a radical approach to building a development plan that is joint within the SADC region when addressing agriculture. But I point out that it must include the theory of de-Arganization, which means the shift and the fast-paced move from young people moving from the agricultural sector into other sectors to try and look for a means. Now, we have seen it, it's happening in Thailand, in other regions, in the East Asian countries, where there is now the introduction of manufacturing and moving away from the traditional norms of agriculture, and the drastic effects that it also has to our GDP. Now, as he indicated that he's a farmer, I am a daughter of one and an upcoming farmer. But as a young person, I have realized that the government does not create the access to markets to help not only just young farmers, but black and deprived, marginalized communities, small-scale farmers that are within the industry. Now, whether it's incentives of infrastructure, it's incentives of funds, it's incentives of irrigation systems, so that we ensure that the small-scale farmers are able to accumulate from below. Once they accumulate from below, they are able to transition into a mode of industrialization, in which is articulated by one of the philosophers of development, by Rousseau, when he speaks about the 5 stages that each and every country goes through in terms of development. He talks about the 5 development stages, which begins from a traditional society, which predominantly looks into agriculture. So in order for you to move from a primary traditional society to a developed society, agriculture needs to be radically invested into to fast-track industrialization mode. So it is important for the accumulation of below for small-scale farmers, and to also ensure that that there is a point of access to land. Various countries, especially Namibia, we have an issue where we have large hectares of land, but they are arable land. Some land that we are given in our resettlement policies are not as productive. So the access to land question goes hand in hand with the progress and the development of the agricultural sector. In order for us to be productive, there are theories that say that sometimes we do not need large hectares of farming. There are theories of scholars from South Africa, from Namibia, who speak about the productivity between large-scale farmers who produce on large hectares of land and small-scale farmers who produce on small-scale land. And they say that productivity is more eminent within the small-scale farmers that have smaller hectares. So if we as government start looking and prioritizing into that, we develop small-scale farming.
Yes, I believe we have a problem. Please try again.
Yes. So if we prioritize ensuring that people who get land through the settlement process come with a necessary package to help them, is one issue that we can really try to assist our farmers and ensure that we can also competitively compete within the commercial market sectors that are dominantly dominated by supermarkets and are unable to create the markets for small-scale farmers to start trading. A problem. Keeps on going on and off. Sorry, Mr. President.
I think we have lost you. Please try again.
It's my mic, sorry.
Yes.
Just lastly, on my point, just to speak on the need to also assist small-scale. Can the tech team please assist with this mic?
I think, Honorable.
Thank you. Just to look into the dominance of the supermarkets that are largely and production markets that are largely dominated. Within Africa, the third seed producers companies are from European countries. And we really need to ensure that we start giving the policies and ensuring that we place that strategic plan that will empower and create markets, access to land, access to infrastructure, irrigation systems, to ensure that young people have the tool set to ensure that we are successful in the market and in the farming industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable. I will recognize the third member from Namibia.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I think all and well has been spoken and alluded to, but I wanted to take it from a different angle and address the issue of greater aspect and greater negotiation and bargaining power as a bloc. One of the key challenges that we faced during the war was the escalating fuel and input cost into the agricultural sector. With reference to that, If you look at what we are paying for petrol prior and before, and the bargaining power or leverage we can get as a block of negotiating from suppliers of this commodity. What is it that we can do to fast track and bring this kind of deliberations to the greater number of the decision maker? She just left. The mama from Tanzania was talking about the mamas only doing small scale and the others doing greater scale. But I think the issue in a nutshell, it's more a flip of the coin kind of an issue. 1 times 20 and 20 times 1 always gives you 20. But there is a difference in the computation of that kind of a scenario. So what is important is to leverage the commercial ability of our products, the commercialization of agricultural networks in order for better advancement of the market. So once the market is leveraged, you are able to get a best good product, regardless of whatever you produce. The volume will just be a substitute of what you are getting, but the quality and the revenue generated will always be guaranteed. Then, with reference to the recommendations, there's one that says joint national and regional agricultural reviews. I think this one is very important moving forward, that on any improvement, data, empathetically or anecdotally, is very much important. Because once you have got data, once you have got engagement, it's only on the basis of that that you are able to improve. So we need constant engagements so as to take stock as to where we are. And once with this data, we are able to, on the basis of our strengths and weaknesses, create that competitive advantage that is needed for the propelment of our agricultural fast tracking. In short, I think I wanted to cement that and support also the report as a due member of that standing committee.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will recognize a member from Lesotho.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Mope Khati. I'm an MP from Lesotho. I would like also to provide my support and contribution to the report that has been presented. And first of all, really to congratulate the presenter of the report, who eloquently detailed the contents of the report. Every time there is a conversation around food and agriculture, I really get excited by the commitment of these conversations to include youth and women in agriculture. I'm a youth farmer. As you all can witness, I'm still in my youth age. And I'm a farmer struggling to get into commercial space in agriculture. And I have very difficult experience for people like me to really get into the same space as very well developed and very well prepared businessmen who are in the same space. So when we talk about food and nutrition security, like the man from Tanzania who mentioned women actually are the drivers of nutrition in our families. They are the ones who determine what we eat today. We eat ugali with which vegetables, with which protein. So they are the ones who are very responsible to see that our children grow without the issue of stunting and nutrition deficiency. But they don't happen to be given enough resources and tools to actually determine what they feed to their families by actually growing it at the scale that is not just for the sake of survival, but they are not given a chance to get into the commercial space of agriculture. And this is one thing that really should be considered and looked at. Agriculture by itself it's like an economic driver of almost every African country. But the problem is it has been for many years left at the infancy stage. We don't see ourselves putting enough priority to commercialize and industrialize agriculture. But we always speak about how much it is supporting our livelihood as an African continent, for example. So we need to really tap into the potential that agriculture has, both for creating employment for women and youth, but as well as driving economic growth on the continent. And you can only achieve that by really putting a deliberate effort to make it a commercial industry, not just a means of feeding and surviving on a daily basis. There have been commitment and achievements in many countries. My country, specifically Lesotho, has taken up agriculture as one of the most important sectors in the country. And we have seen this evident with the allocation of the national budget for the recent government. A lot of money has been put to agriculture development. We see also a lot of development partners in Lesotho coming together with the government to fund projects specifically targeting women and youth in agriculture. So these are some of the steps really that are showing that we are beginning to see that agriculture is a means of economic development in Africa. However, challenges still remain, and some of these challenges have been mentioned by honorable members here, including things like access to finance. Access to finance and women remains a problem in most African countries because young people are not seen to be attractive by banks. When you come and ask for assistance in finance, most banks will require you to have some form of collateral. Where do you get collateral when you're 25 years old? Where do you get collateral if you're a mother who has been taking care of 5 children for the rest of your life? So these are some of the things really that need to be looked at critically because they are the ones that are going to be like change makers. They're the ones who are going to make things go in favor of the very same people we believe are the drivers of the agriculture sector. So we need to look into things like partial credit guarantee.
Please conclude, Honorable.
Thank you, Honorable Mr. President. So what I'm trying to get at is really to start making actionable recommendations, things that could be done to really show our appreciation of the agriculture sector, but not always writing good reports and not really going into the ground and solving the actual problems. Because of time, Mr. President, I would say thank you.
To that off target in terms of Malabo commitment. We all know that in terms of Malabo commitment, each country is supposed to spend 10% of the public resource to the agriculture. But my question is that it's a bit tricky. How do we count the money that is spent on agriculture? If you look in the budget, there's money that is directly spent on agriculture, and we know that this is agricultural money. But let's ask ourselves, for instance, the money that is spent to construct road in the villages, the reason for this construction of road in the village is to enable farmers to transport their harvest, their crops. So this money that are spent on road construction in the village and purposely to assist the farmers in the village, do we count this money as agriculture or road infrastructure? And in Tanzania, for instance, in Tanzania now, we are on a huge project to electrify all the villages in Tanzania. Tanzania is huge in terms of square kilometers, and we have around 12,500 villages. And there's a huge project now to put villages in all the villages, electricity in all the villages in Tanzania, 12,500 villages. And the main purpose of this electricity in the villages is to enable value addition of the crops to take place in the villages. So the money that are spent to put electricity in the village to enable farmers to do value addition, because this is in the value chain of agriculture, then do we count this money as agriculture or energy? So it's tricky. You may count only the direct money that are sent on agriculture and leave alone the money that are used to build roads in the village to help farmers, because this is also agricultural money. And the money that are spent to put electricity in the village to enable farmers to do value addition of their crops, this should also be taken as agricultural money. So when you do calculation on the 10% for the Malabo commitment, I think you should add the money that are sent directly to the agricultural plus the money that are spent to improve infrastructure in the villages, like roads, electricity. All this should be put as a money in the agriculture. And then you will find that in terms of Malabo commitment, we are almost there or we are approaching there. So my worry that we should be careful in calculation, and not only we should not calculating the money that are directly spent on agriculture, but we should also consider other infrastructure that are there to support agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, honorable member. I recognize the member from Zambia.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me an opportunity to make a few comments on the topic that is on the floor. Mr. President, having listened to the members of this August House who have debated before me,
Mr. President, Mr. President, point of order. When he switches on his mic there, it also automatically switches on here. So I do not know what is the problem with the technical.
Yes. We don't know, but we'll try and do the best we
If I switch
can.
off here, it switches off that side as well.
No, you are connected. It means it must just be fixed.
Please proceed, honorable member from Zambia.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
the
you
real
so much.
connection.
Order.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I was saying that having listened to the members of this August House who have contributed before me, they have talked about most of the things that we can do as SADC to improve the agriculture sector, such as putting up infrastructure to support agriculture and to invest in mechanization, among others. And I do agree with what most of my colleagues what they have said. Mr. President, for me, I just want to talk about two issues that I think, as we talk about all these things that we need to do, these two things, they should be accompanying what we are talking about. And these things are, number one, I want to talk about the disposition of our people, Mr. President. You know, sometimes governments do try to give subsidies to people. They do try to give sometimes farming inputs to people that they want to support to farm, especially small scale farmers. But what happens is that you can give people, for example, 8 pockets of fertilizer that they should farm as a household. But those people, because they have other areas where they concentrate, for example, maybe there is a river there and their concentration area is fishing. They will get the fertilizer and sell to other people. Then they remain without food because when they get the money, they will maybe just invest in their fishing business. After the fishing season ends and the farming season also ends, they will remain with no food. And as a result, you find that that way it is very difficult for us to fight food insecurity. In other areas, people concentrate more on maybe charcoal production because they are trees. They think that maybe farming takes a long time. So I think we should also be talking about more of how we can sensitize to our people that farming is important, because no matter how much you can try to help the people that, for example, leading, it's difficult for them to produce food if the things they think about do not support what you're trying to tell them. The other issue I wanted to talk about, Mr. President, that we seriously need to consider is the issue of political will. When you look at most of us who are here, if you ask each country to explain what their plans are, where we are coming from, or where everybody's coming from, we all have so many plans. By 2025, we are going to do this. By 2030, we are going to do this. But you find that because of lack of political will, those good intentions, they are not achieved. Sometimes we as politicians have a problem. We sometimes focus on things that will help us earn votes instead of investing in something that will result in meaningful support to the agriculture sector. Then the other issue that we need to do is to take a comprehensive approach towards agricultural development, because you can't just, for example, put up a dam in one area and people are supported with irrigation farming, but you do not provide the roads that will take you to where the farmers can take their produce after harvesting. So it is very important that as we look at agriculture, we need to take a comprehensive approach. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will ask the members to be brief, please. We are running out of time. I recognize the member from Seychelles.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be very brief. Mr. President, let me add my voice to the debate by listening to the plea made by different members, especially my friend from Honorable Shali from Tanzania. I feel that the issue of discrimination when it comes to land distribution and access to finance to small farmers, be it on a small scale or large scale, is a real issue and should be addressed. I also wish that at the end of this plenary, we come up with a resolution which can later be developed into a model law, let's say, to address the issue of discrimination or inequity when it comes to land distribution or finance for small-scale women farmers. And a national, maybe we could encourage member states to develop national land policies which do not discriminate, but where you can create the equal land distribution for both male and female. In doing so, this would be a solution to address the issue of inequity in land and finance distribution. I beg to submit, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will recognize the member from Angola.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. President, I would like to add my voice to this debate, which I consider very important. First of all, to commend the mover and the seconder. There is no doubt this is an unquestionable issue which is within our plenary assembly, which is modernizing agriculture to address food security and youth unemployment in the SADC region, and what is the role that Parliament can play in this regard. But I'm also rising to talk about the importance to invest in agriculture in our region, considering that agriculture plays a fundamental role, critical role in food security and economic development, and to reduce poverty in our continent, where unfortunately poverty has the face of women, and it has been said here and very well that women produce 70% of food, but unfortunately poverty is still taking the face of a woman, of women. We have to continue with advocacy in order to give the necessary credit so that women can make the best contribution to agricultural development. I would like to share also with the members a very important, ambitious program that Angola is carrying out in order to reduce the dependency of the country on the importing various produce, and which will be carried out at national level in order to boost the production of grain, so that we can have our food sovereignty, food and nutrition, and then reduce importing rice, soya, maize, and wheat. And so $700,000 US and 400,000 to rehabilitate infrastructure to support the agricultural sector. Recently, we inaugurated a strategic project which may provide our region, which is the Lubito railway corridor, which is a strategic, which in the long run, which will link the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, including Dar es Salaam and Beira in Mozambique, and so that we can facilitate sharing produce, not only crops in our region, but we also need to continue investing in clean energy. And here parliamentarians have a critical role to establish legislation so that we can make agriculture a critical tool to fight poverty and hunger and unemployment among our youth. We have also to look at youth training, professional training, vocational training, so that they can contribute to agriculture. So I want to commend this debate, and I commend the mover of this theme, which is very important for our region. These are great challenges we have. We have to share experience among us so that those good experience in some countries can be multiplied elsewhere. Thank you, Mr. President.
Namibia.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is widely documented that education is key to overcoming development challenges, especially in rural areas. Therefore, I believe introducing and following the right curriculums in schools in the field of agriculture may address some of these challenges. Not only is there a direct link between food security and education of rural children, but it has also been shown that basic numeracy and literacy skills help to improve farmers' livelihoods. According to the report of 2007 of the FAO, in order for rural youth to shape agricultural policies affecting them directly, in terms of access to markets and finance, as well as green jobs and land, they need to receive appropriate information and education. Non-formal education and tertiary agricultural education can offer youth more specific knowledge related to agriculture. Now, modern ICTs, such as modern computers, mobile phones, with the use of internet are appealing to the youth segment of any nation, especially the rural youth, and have high potential for facilitating access to information to enhance productivity on farms that will enable agricultural innovation and provide access to financial services and markets. However, high prices of computers and the internet, combined with lack of electricity, limited access to the internet, are negative factors, and mainly women and youth are on the lower receiving end of this. Development and training programs on ecologically friendly agricultural techniques and self-development and social education is the way to go. And I guess we will surely have to emulate from the developed nations. Since the use of mobile phones, especially amongst the youth, farmers can be linked up with agricultural extension officers and researchers to offer a wide range of expertise. Although the experts may be some distances away, the technology enables farmers to seek their advice and ask questions about relevant issues. Therefore, as I'm concluding, Mr. President, parliaments can surely craft suitable laws that will improve youth education and learning, as well as support youth entrepreneurship. And Parliament should bring about laws that will be strengthening the enabling environment for youth and women employment at many levels. With this above said, I thank you for the opportunity granted. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I think we have concluded the debate on the motion, and I will now call upon the mover of the motion, the Honorable Onani, to respond to the debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. On the onset, let me thank the seconder of the motion, who is also a member of parliament from the United Republic of Tanzania, and also the vice chairperson of the Committee on Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources, for a well-elaborated secondment statement. Mr. President, the first question came from Malawi. The question was, it came from the Deputy Speaker of the Republic of Malawi and also the head of delegation of the Malawi delegation in regards to what are the mechanisms used to measure the resources. Because she also heard that Tanzania is among the countries that has been affected by hunger in 2023. Well, I think the mechanism that is used is the 7 Malabo commitments that were signed. And also when we look at some parts, not the whole country, but some parts, they're still struggling because of the weather climate, the climate change and the weather deficit and the weather problems that we had in the previous season. So that is where we come up to say, not the whole country, but a few parts, they may be affected. Mr. President, we also had an intervention from South Africa. Basically, the member from South Africa was alluding to the issues of processing plants to add value to our commodities. Because usually when we export them, it is difficult to make more profits than if we can have those processing plants within the countries so that we create jobs within the SADC region and also we can add value to the commodities that we're working on. And also my mother from Zambia, she also alluded to what Zambia is doing to achieve the common goal in as far as promoting agriculture is in Zambia, and also what the efforts that the government is doing. We should also thank her for enlightening the House with the commitments and what Zambia, the government of Zambia is doing. Mr. President, we also had an intervention from Botswana, our honorable member who is also the assistant minister of the local government. She alluded to so much on how useful and how important agriculture is, and also the challenges that we are facing in as far as the low budget of the 10% funding of the Malabo commitment that was made. And also she spoke so much of the harassments, the gender-based violence that women are facing, especially when they are on their way to and from the farms, which is something that we believe that we're heading towards the right direction, but there is more that needs to be done to protect our women. Mr. President, we also had an intervention from the Democratic Republic of Congo, whereby she also lamented to say most of what she wanted to say had already been said. So I would go now straight to Zimbabwe. Our own mother from Zimbabwe, who also happens to be the previous chair, who had chaired this committee that I'm taking, and I'm also privileged to get more knowledge from her because she had this seat that I'm holding today, and she's in my committee, and from time and again, we're always sharing notes. She also happened to be on the trip that we went to Venezuela together, and she has also alluded to the fact that the people and the citizens of Venezuela, they have come up to be united and to speak one language. And in as much as they have got rich oil and gas, but they have also started to diversify in agriculture so that they're able to produce their own food. And also this is something that SADC can tap from the South to South cooperation in as far as issues to do with food is concerned, because I'm sure there are some foods that can be grown better in Venezuela that they can do trade with the SADC member states. And there's some food that can also be grown within the SADC member states that we can also transport or we can also ship to Venezuela, hence enhancing the South to South cooperation. Mr. President, we also had an intervention from Tanzania, and my mother alluded to, and also she has always been an advocate for the women. And she's a senior citizen of the United Republic of Tanzania. And we also just want to thank for her interventions. And also she has alluded to the fact that we need to help our women in all the member states. And this is a common factor that we're sharing within the 16 of the 15 member states of the SADC region to say our women, we still need to do more to empower them, because these are the women that provide the nutrition food that we're talking about. She has alluded to that mostly it's the little that the woman finds that she brings home, which is very true, because the woman has got a touching heart to the kids that she bears. Mr. President, moving on to Namibia, my brother from Namibia also has alluded to and also spoke swiftly of what has taken place in Namibia and what is happening and how much they are rich in land, but they spoke about the challenges that they've got in terms of water and the other items that she had spoken about. And also he spoke about Angola, Botswana, Zambia having the water, and also the speaker of Lesotho had whispered to me to say, no, tell the people from Namibia they should come to Lesotho, we've got a lot of water. Honorable President, and also the second speaker from Namibia also has alluded to the fact that we need to do more in assisting the small-scale farmers. And also the third speaker spoke about the same, to say how best can we sustain and help the farmers. And also the third speaker, who is also the leader of the delegation, of the Namibian delegation, had also spoken the volumes in terms of when we are in Venezuela. He was also part of the trip. When we saw how rich Venezuela is in hydrocarbons, and that is something that we are mostly also import in most of the member states, we had said, why can't we come up as one as SADC so that we can have a huge volume and we can negotiate better, just like what Tanzania was saying yesterday, to say they want to be the hub of the pharmaceuticals, so that we SADC member states, we can tap in from Tanzania when we want to buy pharmaceutical items. So we also thought the same, to say, as SADC member states, why can't we add up our volumes of the carbohydrates, so the hydrocarbons, so that we can also trade meaningfully with Venezuela and bargain for the best price, and then we can distribute amongst the SADC member states. Mr. President, also we had an intervention from Lesotho. It always gives me hope to see the youth taking part in politics. And as you can see, he's a youthful member. He has just also won in Lesotho, in the Kingdom of Lesotho. We should also thank the people of Lesotho Because when we have got most of the youth in these decision-making positions, that definitely gives the hope to Malawi, not to Malawi as such, but to the SADC region and to the globe and to Africa as a whole. This is something that I've also advocated for, to say within the SADC-PF, any chairperson within the SADC member states who is chairing the Women Caucus, automatically she becomes a member of the SADC-PF. But that doesn't apply to the youth. And yet we talk a lot about the youth. So this is a plea to you, Mr. President, that at least we should also have that quota, that any youthful member that is part of the youth caucus and is chairing the youth caucus in their respective states, they should automatically be part of the SADC-PF, just like the way women are, so that we're also balancing the equation, Mr. President. My colleague from Lesotho also spoke highly about the driving economies of the agriculture sector and how hard it is for the youth and the women and the vulnerable groups to get access to financing. That is very, very true. And if we don't have access to financing, it is very difficult. So when we look at the way our colleagues in the West do it, they empower their youth. I mean, when you look at the inventor of Facebook, by the time he invented Facebook, he had nothing. But there are people that came in, there are institutions that came in to finance his idea, and now he's a billionaire. The same applies within our youth. You would find that we're producing the best youth, the best brains from the agriculture sector, from the polytechnics. But now when it comes to say, I've got this idea and I want to pursue it, he's got challenges in getting financing. So that is something that I think within the SADC member states, we should indeed take it at heart and see how best we can help the youth. We also had an intervention from Tanzania. Mr. President, the intervention, I think to me, it really made sense to say, how do we calculate? Because if you have constructed a road that is going to assist to transport the agro-produce that our farmers are producing, where do we put that amount? In infrastructure or within the agriculture sector, so that we're able to achieve the 10% of the Malabo commitment? Most of the examples that he gave, really, they were around the same corner to say, if we have brought electricity for our people in the rural areas, so that we can give them the maize meals to do some value addition, how do we quantify that? I think that is a point taken, and it is very, very important, and I think we're going to take it up as a committee to see how best we can include that. We also had an intervention on Zambia. Zambia also spoke about the challenges that we do face in as far as subsidy programs are concerned in our respective countries, which is very true. We cannot run away from that, because you would want to assist a farmer, you give them the 8 bags of fertilizer like my brother from Zambia had said, but they end up selling it. So basically, I think we need to do also a little mapping to say exactly what do our people need. Because there are some areas, where, the way example he gave to say there's a river and then they're also doing fish farming. I think those people that we know that these areas, they are more of doing the fish farming, we should support them with what matters most to them. It should not be universal. It should be customized or tailor-made for the particular district and for the particular villages from the member states that we're advancing. Mr. President, we also had an intervention from the Seychelles. And of course, she's the chairman of the Women Caucus. So definitely she has to also champion and advocate for more to be done on women, especially on the land, which is very, very true. It is very difficult for women to access the land. As a result, they end up being harassed, and a lot of things happen to our women. Mr. President, there was also an intervention from Angola. They spoke very well on the investments that they're doing in agriculture, and also we should applaud. There was a figure of 700,000 and 400,000. That's a total of 1.1 million. That also is being directed to the farmers to improve in different aspects. I think we should also applaud to that. And also we should also applaud to them for the railway corridor that is being championed. That is going to be linking Tanzania, Mozambique, and of course the Atlantic Ocean. And also their efforts that they have got, that they're investing also in the clean energy. That's something that we can also learn from. And also she spoke about experience sharing. Mr. President, I feel that is also a critical role that member states can learn from each other to say, what is our colleague doing best? And how best can we learn from them so that we don't reinvent the wheel, but we just carry on and keep on polishing and making it better. Mr. President, we also had an intervention from my dear sister from Namibia. She spoke very well in our issues to do with education, skills, technology, because these are the things that are going to attract the youth. You see, Mr. President, for the youth to be attracted to agriculture, we need to move with time. So now we have got technology, we have got the education, we have got the skills. And also, Mr. President, I think it's also high time that we as SADC member states, we should also employ what our colleagues are doing. I remember the European countries, and I happen to have a friend there who was studying in Italy, a particular degree program, but because there was one course that was not being taken care of in Italy, he had gone to Amsterdam to do that particular course and went back to Italy, and he managed to still get the degree from the university that he was studying in Italy. Mr. President, the reason why, the point that I'm trying to drive at is if I'm a graduate from Malawi, I cannot go to Tanzania and they appreciate my education, or when I go to Namibia, I go to South Africa, they don't appreciate. So now it's like we are wasting our human resource. And also when someone has got a diploma from South Africa and comes to Malawi, they can continue the 2 years and get a degree, because we need to make sure that we're also saving costs on training the human capital. So we also need to find a way on how best we can share the education that my dear sister from Namibia said. Mr. President, suffice to say in my concluding remarks, is the future is food, the future is energy. I submit, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. I will now put the question that the report of the Standing Committee on Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources on the situation of hunger and food insecurity in the SADC region, challenges fueling food insecurity, major international goals and Africa agenda, investments and performance of the Malabo commitments, an environment that can attract the youth to invest in agriculture, be adopted. Are there any objections? There being none, I declare the report of the Standing Committee on Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources is duly adopted. Thank you very much. Members, we are overdue for a health break, so we will rise and adjourn, and we will resume at 12:15. Thank you, honorable members, for returning to the table. As we resume, I would like to advise the movers presenting motions to use their best judgment as to when they can summarize for the sake of timekeeping, and also in responding to summarize by addressing the issues that have been raised. We shall move to the next
on democratization, governance, and human rights, titled Towards a Rights-Based Approach to the Conduct of Business Within the Natural Resources Sector in the SADC region. What can parliamentarians do?
Thank you, Madam Secretary General. I now call upon Honorable Nzwidamilimo, Chairperson of the Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights, to move the motion.
Oh, no, it's okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I beg to move that this plenary assembly do adopt the report of the Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights to the 53rd Plenary Assembly session laid on the table of the House on the 4th of July, 2023.
Thank you, Honorable. May I have a seconder?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Honorable Mothu from Namibia, I move to second the motion for the adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights to the 53rd Plenary Assembly. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable. The motion being seconded, I will now call upon the Honorable Nzwidamilimo to present the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I recognize you and all esteemed delegates in this plenary session. Mr. President, pursuant to its mandate in terms of Rule 42D of the Rules of Procedure, the DGHR Standing Committee convened on the 9th May 2023. The meeting was in the form of a training session under the theme Open Court towards a right-based approach to the conduct of business within the natural resources sector in the SADC region. What parliamentarians can do, close quote. Mr. President, the committee received presentations from resource persons from the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, ZELA, the Center for Applied Legal Studies, CALS, at the Wits University, the African Coalition for Corporate Accountability, and the Business and Human Rights Resource Center. These organizations are involved in promoting the concept of business and human rights in the extractive sector. Mr. President, a rights-based approach to the conduct of business in the extractive sector was relevant to Southern Africa in view of the region's endowment with both solid and liquid mineral resources. These resources, if properly utilized, could be a boon for the progressive realization of environmental, economic, social, and cultural rights, including supporting social protection programs, creating jobs, eradicating poverty, and reducing inequalities. The committee regretted to note that the history of exploitation of natural resources in Southern Africa, like elsewhere else on the African continent, had often been associated with human rights violations and enormous environmental damage.
The multinational or transnational corporations, TNCs, operating in the sector had the tendency to disregard human and community rights, resulting in flagrant violations of environmental, labor, health, and human rights, and in some cases, even death. Mr. President, another sad reality is that the current legislative frameworks and state institutions mandated to regulate corporate conduct to safeguard human and community rights are weak, leaving communities vulnerable. Globalization and transboundary nature of TNC's operations are aggravating the situation by creating unbalanced power relations between the state and TNCs, and territorial regulation by individual countries has become impracticable. Mr. President, the necessity to transition to renewable energies has triggered increased demand and exploitation of transitional minerals like lithium, cobalt, and copper. Mineral resources required to manufacture batteries and other green technologies. The SADC region is home to a significant share of these critical minerals, namely DRC, which produces about 70% of the world's cobalt. South Africa has the largest share of manganese reserves. Mozambique has significant shares of graphite, and Zimbabwe, which has the largest deposits of lithium in Africa. There is need to maximize the potential for the region's transitional minerals for the benefit of citizens and ensure a significant contribution to human development. This can be done by making sure that the human rights impact of mining projects is fully considered and that remedies are implemented on the entire transitional mineral value chain. Mr. President, while voluntary frameworks for protection and fulfillment of human rights in the business, such as the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, do exist, these were evidently ineffective, hence the urgent need for a legally binding instrument. This is precisely why the resolution by the 26th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council in 2014 proposing for the international legally binding instrument must not only be applauded, but should be supported by all progressive forces. Further commendation should also go to one of our own member states, South Africa, which alongside Ecuador sponsored this landmark resolution at the UN. Similarly, the decision by the 74th Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, adopting a resolution on business and human rights in Africa on the 7th of March 2023, was a landmark development for Africa in its quest to ensure TNC's accountability and access to remedies for violation of business-related human rights. Mr. President, the process of developing a legally binding instrument to hold corporates accountable has been very highly contested, with relentless opposition from the global north. This is to be expected, given what is at stake. The global south should remain resolute because the current voluntary frameworks were clearly defective. Mr. President, following its deliberations, the committee resolved to recommend to the plenary assembly the following. 1, to reaffirm the centrality of parliamentarians in advancing the concept of business and human rights in the extractive sector in Southern Africa so as to ensure that TNC's comply with the human rights and environmental laws, and that remedies are available and accessible to citizens and community in case of violations. Number 2, urge SADC parliamentarians to raise awareness among stakeholders in their respective countries, including among the relevant government ministries regarding the binding UN Treaty on Business and Human Rights, and encourage robust participation in the process to ensure that final outcome would be inclusive, covering all human rights in order to curb corporate impunity of the TNCs. Number 3, urge SADC parliamentarians to prioritize strengthening of the oversight function of Parliament by supporting the process of adoption of the binding treaty, as this would enhance accountability by the government in discharging its regulatory role and establish effective measures to protect states from corporate capture. Number 4, call on SADC parliaments to strengthen the representative role of SADC legislatures by amplifying their voice in the ongoing processes towards the adoption of the binding treaty on business and human rights, leveraging collaboration with partners, including civil society organizations. 5, encourage SADC-PF Secretariat to, in line with already entrenched model law-making approach, explore the feasibility of developing a model textual provisions for the binding treaty, which serves as a benchmark for negotiations and subsequent domestication at national level. 6, call on SADC national parliaments to curb corporate impunity through strong legislation at national level. 7, urge SADC parliamentarians to support the African Commission on Human and People's Rights resolution on business and human rights in Africa and advocate for its speedy implementation to ensure accountability and access to remedy for business-related human rights violations in Africa, particularly for those marginalized and vulnerable populations. 8, urge SADC parliamentarians to leverage their mandate to advocate for the alignment of regional natural resources governance frameworks with the business and human rights concept, and for the development of national action plans on the business and human rights. Number 9, urge the SADC-PF Secretariat to prioritize the training of members of parliaments in business and human rights through collaboration with partners in order to buttress evidence-based approaches in promoting the respect for human rights and in the conduct of business within the national resources sector in the SADC region. Number 10, call for sustained collaboration between SADC-PF and the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, ZELA, the Center for Applied Legal Studies, CAUS, Wits University, and the African Coalition for Corporate Accountability, and the Business and Human Rights Resource Center to ensure that the training of members of parliament in business and human rights is undertaken. Mr. President, I beg to move. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Mover of the motion. I now call on the seconder, the Honorable Utara Mutu, to present the seconding speech on the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, pertinent, particularly for the SADC region. It is incontrovertible that multinational corporations wield significant economic and political power. This makes it imperative that a robust mechanism must be established to ensure the protection of human and community rights from corporate abuse. Mr. Speaker, the abuse and the absence of the sufficient regulation and enforcement of mechanisms means that the unregulated actions of international corporations have far-reaching consequences, often with detrimental consequences to the vulnerable communities and individuals. Evidence shows on how mining activities by corporates have in some cases resulted in severe human rights violations ranging from forced labor to child exploitation to environmental degradation and displacement of local communities. Mr. President, as ably articulated by the movements, the lack of legally binding instruments to hold corporations accountable for their actions perpetuates a culture of impunity. The absence of clear guidelines and the consequence has seen more corporations take advantage of the situations to prioritize profits over human rights. I therefore support the call for the mover to establish an international framework to set clear standards and enforcement mechanisms to ensure that the rights of individuals and communities are protected and respected. I am equally in full support, Honorable President, that the mover and should look into the role of parliamentarians by enhancing them to enable them to participate with a full mandate to develop the framework and to leverage their lawmaking representation and oversight functions in this endeavor. Mr. President, it is important to note that a legally binding instrument will establish legal obligations and penalties for non-compliance by corporates. It will also provide a mechanism for affected communities and individuals that seek justice and obtain remedies for any violations that they have suffered. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, it will be a major step towards the creation of a more equitable and global and just global economic system where human rights are the key consideration in business practices. In addition, a legally binding instrument will promote transparency and enhance corporate responsibility by reassuring mining companies to conduct human rights due diligence and identifying and promptly addressing potential risks and impacts before they occur. Such a proactive approach would greatly contribute towards the approach to the rights of violations, rather than merely reacting to them after the act. Mr. President, the opposition to the proposal to develop the instrument by the Global North, ostensibly because it will stifle the economic growth and burden businesses with additional regulations, is regrettable and misplaced, and stems very procul self-interest because the protection of human and community rights are not all to the development, the economic development of the region. On contrary, it is an essential component for ensuring sustainable and inclusive growth, which is mutually beneficial. The upholding of human rights standards helps to foster an environment of trust, which ensures long-term prosperity for all. An international instrument on business and human rights would help to level the playing field by ensuring that corporates are held accountable for human rights violations that would be taken place or that could take place with their subsidiaries or even through the supply chain without being burdened by the issue of jurisdiction. Mr. President, I further state that I am thrilled in learning that the mover will push for the legally binding international instrument on business and human rights that will address cross-cutting issues such as gender, climate, and environmental justice. It is critical given the fact that women have benefited less from mining and yet they bear the greatest cost. In the same light, corporates that have profited from exploiting the environment have left the burden behind for others to bear, especially women and young people who live in abject poverty. Mr. President, as I conclude, I wish to throw myself with full weight behind the recommendation by the mover for the SADC-PF Secretariat to prioritize the training of MPs in business and human rights through the collaboration with various partners. Parliamentarians have a pivotal role to play in efforts towards the establishment of legally binding international instruments on human rights and businesses that are to succeed. It is therefore important that they are capacitated to effectively use their constitutional mandate as legislators to protect the rights of all individuals and communities that could be and that are affected by corporate activities by the extractive sector. Mr. President, it is also notable that the establishment of a legally binding instrument will help to create a more equitable and just global economy where human rights are paramount and the business are in unison. And with that, Honorable President, I so move.
Probably known as democratic rights. And I think what we're looking at is now called human security. And when we talk about human security, which is well encompassed in the African Union Agenda of 2063, what we look at is democracy, human rights, and rule of law, the basic tenets of human security. And basically what we're looking there, in democracy, we look at free and fair elections where the people get the government that they deserve or elect. Under rule of law, we get that no one in the country is above the law. And under human rights, of course, that we protect our citizens. We do everything in our power to ensure that we protect our citizens. Now, in this committee, we've had provocative guest speakers. We've had speakers talk about child marriages, female genitalia mutilation, trafficking, threats to our safety in terms of terrorism in SADC. Nothing touched me more than the guest speaker we had from Zimbabwe, who was the son of a prominent MP, who spoke about the colonialists and the state in which they left our continent. Because what he says is that whoever, whether it was Portugal, whether it was the UK, whether it was France, they all left us, and he can challenge any one of our countries to tell us which of those countries ran a perfect democracy. Which of those countries were leading our countries in a perfect democracy? We're allowing our countries to work in a perfect democracy. And when they left us, when they had taken what they needed or when they had gone, they left us a system, but they expected us to all of a sudden be the experts of that system. They demanded us to be the experts of that system. And not only that, we would be rewarded or we would be given money based on being experts of a system that we were not the masters of a system that was not, many of us did not grow up with that system. So when you take that into account, Africa has come a long way. I think SADC has taken a longer journey. And for that, this committee is tasked with something very important, and that's called the role model laws. Because I think it allows all countries to adapt to a law that is made by Africans. Because it's Africa that has to find African solutions to African problems. I don't think it's Europe or America that must come here to find the problems of Africa. I think it's Africa that has to find those solutions. So what we need to do, we need to strengthen our laws in what's called the role model laws, and then we need to get countries to adopt to what is called these role model laws. And this is the committee that pushes these type of laws. And I want to pay tribute to the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I do not have other requests for intervention. I have the member from Zambia. Will the member be assisted with the microphone, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, allow me to thank you for the opportunity and state that as a member of this standing committee, I support the resolutions made by the committee because I'm part of the committee as my own. Mr. President and honorable members in this symposium, there are numerous challenges of doing business within the natural resources sector. The challenges mainly speak to environmental problems that affect the surrounding communities, which include water pollution, land degradation, air pollution. What I want to state here, Mr. President, that SADC countries must advocate and strengthen laws that speaks to SADC as a bloc. Mr. President, doing business in SADC communities must be a voice to send a message to other blocs in the world that SADC is able to stand on its own. Mr. President, SADC countries, we have a lot of natural resources. If well utilized, we are not supposed to be beggars to the outside world, because what we have, Mr. President, is enough to see SADC stand on its own. Mr. President, we need instruments that protect our citizens from losing their land, especially where they become vulnerable to investors. You find, Mr. President, that an investor, he's coming almost with nothing to come and do mining in my country or in our territory. But this investor will have the authority to displace our citizens. And these citizens have got nowhere to run to because our chiefs, because our ministers, because our laws are too weak to protect our citizens. So in moving forward, Mr. President, as a SADC region, we really need to push for laws that protect our citizens. Mr. President, there are times in our countries we don't know the amount of natural resources which we are losing because these so-called investors who are coming to do business with us, they don't allow us to be near where they are mining our copper, the amount of gold which they are getting out of our countries, and we are there looking at them because we have allowed it. Here we are, Mr. President, we are begging to find finances to help ourselves as SADC, when what we have can sustain SADC. Therefore, Mr. President, speaking as from the Republic of Zambia, our parliament in Zambia has pushed a lot of legislative laws. Through its legislative functions, we have enacted a number of pieces of legislation aimed at promoting forest conservation and management as a means to combat climate change. These include, Mr. President, the Forest Act number 4 of 2015, the Environmental Management Act number 12 of 2011, the Water Resource Management Act number 21 of 2011, the Wildlife Act number 4 of 2015, Business Regulatory Act number 3 of 2014. Mr. President, why we have done so as a country, we are trying to see in a small way how we can protect our natural resources. And I encourage all SADC members to ensure that we are pushing necessary laws that protect what belongs to SADC, especially in protecting our citizens. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now call upon the mover of the motion, the Honorable Nzwidamilimo, to respond. Your hand is up. I'm sorry, I did not notice. I recognize the member from Botswana.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me also thank the mover of the motion and the seconder. Let me hasten to say that I've been a member of this committee for 5 years, between 2014 and 2019. And I've had the privilege in 2017 of leading SADC-PF MPs in the election observation mission in the Kingdom of Lesotho, which I think was a great success. So that's my first point of departure, actually. That's my point of departure. That we need, as SADC-PF, to show more commitment when it comes to this important exercise of somewhat a peer review of election observations. Most of our countries seldom send delegations for election observation missions. It would appear it's one of those things that take the back seat when the time comes. Mr. President, I'm mentioning this point precisely because most of our countries in SADC will be going to the polls either this year or next year. Most countries in the SADC region will be going to the polls this year and next year. And it's very important that we have election observation missions from, the likes of SADC-PF. I know we've been talking for quite some time about the idea of how this objective can be funded. And I hope that we will engage, as member states. The second point which I want to touch on is the issue of the model law on elections, the SADC-PF model law on elections, that I think we also need to, as countries, show more commitment in reforming our electoral systems to adhere to this model law on elections. We need to also emphasize the need to preserve the rights of members of parliament in various parliaments in the SADC region and Africa at large. It's an issue that I always see cropping up at the IPU, where there are various reports about how various parliaments or various countries are faring in the protection of the rights of MPs. And I think it's somewhat lacking in our forum. It's an issue that we may need to look at. Situations where, when it comes to elections, opposition candidates, that is the only time that we know that they could have committed crimes and they are put in prison or they are tried. That is the only time that we get to know that they could be owing tax and the tax authorities will be unleashed to chase them, only to find that after elections they are actually owed by the taxman. Where there is clear no public funding of political parties, and when the opposition cobbles up and make sure that they enlist funders there are all sorts of disruptions. You confiscate or ground their aircrafts so that they don't move like those that are milking the incumbency move. These are some of the things that we, as Africans, we need to be telling each other the truth. I have sat in these forums for quite some times. I've seen different faces. Sometimes you meet somebody, they are in the opposition. Next time they are in government. Next time they are also not in government. And I think the message must go to those that have made it their habit to violate the rights of those who don't share their views and think that they can develop their countries in a much better or different way. To be seen as enemies akin to people committing treasons. And as I say, we need to look at these things. The access to the state media. These are issues that, are pertinent in various African countries. But when we meet at these forums, we don't tell each other the truth. We don't have even some mechanisms of making sure that we adhere to the...
Please conclude, Honorable.
Yeah, as I conclude, let us make sure that we adhere to these model laws that we enact as the SADC-PF and live up to the values of or espoused in our constitutive documents. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable. I have two requests. I will have to conclude debate for the reasons of time. I recognize the member from Namibia and the member from RDC. Honorable Member, Namibia.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Poverty is the root cause of many problems and poses a threat to food security, climate change, insecurity, democracy, and human rights, amongst others. And it increases the risk of conflict, which in turn serves as fertile breeding grounds for security threats, Mr. President. And we as governments must develop mechanisms to minimize the above mentioned before it becomes a challenge for all of us in SADC. I so conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The member from RDC.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the case of DR Congo is a specific case, not only because of the weakness of our legislation when it comes to handling the business and handling and monitoring natural resources, but also because of the different violence occurring vis-à-vis the citizens for more than 20 years due to the protracted conflict in order to loot the wealth and breach human rights. Mr. President, I wanted to underscore this issue.
Thank you very much, Honorable. I will now proceed to call on the mover of the motion, the Honorable Nzwidamilimo, to respond. Honorable mover of the motion, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Firstly, I would like to thank Honorable Mootu from Namibia for seconding the motion so ably. She raises very pertinent issues in her secondment. The one that really piqued my mind is she raises the gender issue, which is very relevant in the human rights violations that are associated with natural resources extraction. Mr. President, you find that women are involved in gold extraction, you know, the small scale gold extraction. In Zimbabwe, we call these people amakorokosa. So you find women are also involved and the youth are also involved. So they face the brunt of the violations in human rights. And the honorable member also stressed on the need for transparency, which really I can't add more to that. The other issue that is raised by the honorable member is unity within the SADC region. We really, when we are crafting these legal frameworks, we need to do it as a block, Mr. President, so that there is no divide and rule. When you look at these TNCs, when they come to Africa, they will come to country X, and if they find the rules are tight in terms of doing business, they then move next door to country Y. And in that country, maybe they find the rules are a bit relaxed. Yet we are in the same region. So the most positive way is to have a blanket rules that cover the whole region so that there is no divide and rule. I would also want to thank, you see, most of the comments really were complimentary. Honorable Bergman from South Africa talked about the importance of model laws, and critically he emphasized on implementation. It's said that whilst we are dealing with this topic, Mr. President, we are then led back to model laws and implementation. Then we really go back to yesterday's topic again, where we want to transform to a regional parliament, which is going to make binding laws. Because if you look at us now, we almost, one would say we are crafting laws that are meaningless. Why am I saying that? Model laws, yes, are good. But if we are leaving the implementation on voluntary basis in terms of domestication, then we are not winning at all, because country Y might decide not to do anything about a certain model law, and there is nothing binding. So maybe we should really, when we are looking at our model laws and implementation and domestication, this should be the impetus to push us to encourage the executive so much that we move this wheel of the regional parliament, move it faster. The quicker we reach our target of having a regional parliament, which is going to make laws that are binding, then all these problems that we talk about will fall away. Mr. President, I want to thank Honorable Lumai for raising issues again that he stressed on environmental laws, the environmental transgressions that are brought by these TNCs, which really impact negatively on the citizens. Because some of them, I want to give an example where they come, they encourage gold panning or just topical gold extraction. So these people that are employed by these TNCs will leave huge holes that are not filled in. And there we have with our poor farmers that have got cattle that graze within those lands. You find that the cattle fall in, even people fall into these deep craters that are left. The environment is damaged, and the community as well is seriously affected. I would also want to thank, lastly, the honorable member from Botswana. The honorable member, when he was raising his points, he actually said, I quote him, point of departure. I want to emphasize the point of departure in the fact that, yes, he talked about the mandate of the DGHR committee, but he departed from the report, much as everything that he was saying is right, relevant, and it shows that he was once a member of our committee, but he forgot to concentrate mainly on the report on the extractive industry and the effects that they have on human and the health rights of the population. Mr. President, I beg to move for the adoption of the report. Thank you.
Excuse me, I will start again. My microphone was off. I now put the question that the report of the Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights, titled Towards a Rights-Based Approach to the Conduct of Business within the Natural Resources Sector in the SADC region, what parliamentarians can do, that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? There being none, the report of the Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights, DGHR, is therefore duly adopted. Thank you. Secretary General, would you please read the next order of business for the day?
Motion for the adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development, on the role of parliamentarians in promoting the gender and climate justice agenda in the SADC region.
Thank you. May I call upon the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development, Honorable Shali Josepha Raymond, to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I beg you to move the motion in front of this plenary assembly to adopt the report of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development laid on the table of the House on 4th July 2023. I present.
Thank you. I will call for secondment. Do I have a seconder?
Thank you, Mr. President. I, Paula Cooper, the Vice Chairperson of the Committee on Gender Equality, Women's Advancement and Youth Development, so seconds.
Thank you, Honorable. The Honorable mover of the motion will now present the motion.
Mr. President, pursuant to the terms of reference articulated under Rule 42, subsection A of the SADC-PF Rules of Procedure, the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development, known as GEWED, held a one-day meeting under the theme, The Role of Parliamentarians in Promoting Gender and Climate Justice Agenda in the SADC region, on Friday, 12th May 2023. Mr. President, considering that honorable members have read the report, allow me to comment only on some of the pertinent observations made during the meeting. Mr. President, the meeting focused on gender and climate justice in the SADC region because just like elsewhere on the African continent, women tend to be disproportionately affected by climate change impacts. Mr. President, it was a well-established fact that across the world, women depend more on natural resources such as land and nature, which are fundamentally affected by climate change. In this regard, agriculture is the most important employment sector for women in lower middle income countries. In this vein, it is notable that during periods of drought, erratic rainfall and floods, women as agricultural workers and primary procurers work harder to secure income and resources for their families. Mr. President, available evidence also shows that climate change affects women more negatively compared to men. In the areas of agricultural production, food and nutrition security, health, water and energy, climate change-related disaster, migration and conflict, among other things. In relation to girls, the effects of climate change result in added pressure on them as they often have to leave school to help their mothers to manage the increased burden. Mr. President, this situation aggravates existing gender inequalities because of persisting gender norms and discrimination. Arising from the foregoing, it is evident that gender equality and climate justice are inextricably linked. Mr. President, parliaments have a duty to ensure that legislation and policy implementations must put women and girls at the center of the fight for climate justice and the shift towards a greener economy. Parliamentarians must leverage their legislative roles to champion the development and implementation of concrete actions that include financing women's and girls' climate solutions by supporting the efforts of women, particularly at grassroots and rural levels, to respond to the climate crisis and increasing the number of women in climate and environmental leadership and jobs. Parliaments should also demand more accountability at all levels by insisting on equitable access to climate finance, technologies, and knowledge. Mr. President, against the background of the deliberations, the Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development, therefore, recommends the following to the 53rd Plenary Assembly. First, or 1, urge SADC member states to pass legislation that promotes the use of clean energy in order to mitigate climate change. Second, appeal to SADC member states to consider climate change as a business opportunity. In this regard, implore SADC parliamentarians to endeavor to persuade their governments to invest in youth innovation for mitigation and the adaptive measures such as production of solar panels, water harvesting, equipment and energy conservation appliances, among others. Third, call on member states to have climate change solutions that address challenges and threats to women's livelihoods, health, and safety. Fourth, argue SADC nations, parliaments to take pragmatic actions in the form of voting for budgets which enhance funding towards climate change mitigation actions. Fifth, resolve to take measures to capacitate SADC parliamentarians to advocate to the full operationalization and resourcing of the loss and damage facility to the countries within the region that suffer from the effect of climate change, do not agonize from increased debt burden in their quest to reconstruct infrastructure damages by these extreme weather events. Sixth, strongly argue parliamentarians in the SADC region to advocate for concessional or grant financing for climate change rather than embracing commercial loans. Seventh, call on SADC member states to integrate climate change solutions into programs that are aimed at addressing barriers to gender equality. Eighth, urge member states to enhance gender-sensitive investments in adoption, mitigation, technology transfer, and capacity building initiatives. Ninth, resolve that the SADC Parliamentary Forum, in collaboration with the member parliaments, facilitate parliamentary institutional capacity building programs so as to enable SADC parliaments to provide a strong mechanism for ongoing parliamentary scrutiny, especially as it is related to women and climate change programs. 10th, urge parliamentarians in the SADC region to leverage on their representative role and provide a knowledge link with women constituents as a vital phase of their country's gender-sensitive response and resilience to climate change. 11th, reiterate the need for SADC parliamentarians to take all necessary measures to promote the voice of women in the climate change discourse and for the inclusion of women's priorities and needs such as water, food, security, agriculture, energy, health, disaster, management, and conflict ought to be reflected in the development, planning, and funding processes for climate change, adoption, mitigation, and resilience. 12, call upon SADC parliamentarians to advocate for improvement in early warning systems for various extreme weather events. 13th, and the last, maybe, as a best practice, encourage national parliaments to set up caucuses or clubs that will sustain the climate change discourse in the parliamentary forum. Mr. President, we decided to number them to make it easier for the parliamentarians to remember. We understand that parliamentarians are busy. So if they cannot remember all of them, at least 2, 3, 4, or 5. Mr. President, in conclusion, I wish to express profound gratitude to the Secretary General and her team for the guidance and support rendered to the committee during the meeting. Mr. President, I beg to move the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I now will allow the seconder of the motion, the Honorable Paula Cooper, to present the seconding speech. Is the member ready? The seconder of the motion? Microphone? Okay.
Thank you.
Aye, thank you.
Comiso, Paula. Comiso. Comiso.
I said in a joke, I'm going to my house here. Thank you very much. Mr. President, I rise to support the motion to adopt the report of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development, so moved by the chairperson, Honorable Shirley Josepha Raymond. Mr. President, the SADC region continues to battle with the challenge of gender inequality, with several member states struggling to eliminate both the evident and unseen barriers to gender equality. This state of affairs in the region is not different from the rest of the African continent, where women are disproportionately affected by climate change impacts. Mr. President, climate change is one of the most serious threats facing the SADC region, and women and girls are the most affected. To this effect, parliamentarians should play a crucial role in ensuring a gender-responsive climate and environmental action through their legislative, oversight, representation, and budgetary functions. Parliament should ensure that women have equitable access to productive resources, such as finance, land, water, and clean energy. This will equip them with coping mechanisms that will help them to manage the devastating impacts of climate change. Mr. President, adding to the challenges that the mover so eloquently outlined, allow me to indicate also that women's and girls' health are endangered by climate change and disasters through limited access to services and health care, as well as increasing the risks related to maternal and child health. Gender inequality has also created disparities in access to information, mobility, decision-making, and access to resources and training, with women being highly disadvantaged. For example, research indicates that extreme heat increases the incidence of childbirth, of stillbirth. Further, climate change has increased the spread of vector-borne illnesses such as malaria, dengue fever, and Zika virus, which are linked to worse maternal and neonatal outcomes. Mr. President, I therefore agree with the mover of this motion that SADC member states be urged to enhance gender-sensitive investments in adaptation, mitigation, technology transfer, and capacity-building initiatives around climate change. There is need to have robust and more systematic adaptation and mitigation methods in the way climate change impacts are handled. There is need to develop comprehensive policy options for addressing both climate change and gender inequality and identify mechanisms to address gender differences in vulnerability to climate change. Member states, therefore, should put practical and responsive measures in place to enable communities manage and cope with the impact of climate change. This will help SADC communities to reduce the impact of climate change on their lives. Mr. President, as stated by the mover of this motion, climate change has devastating impacts in our countries, and sadly, disproportionately affects women and girls and worsened their socioeconomic status. Interventions at global, regional, and national levels to address the challenge of climate change and its effects remain inadequate. To this effect, it is imperative that parliaments are mobilized to spearhead ambitious climate actions, owing to their centrality by virtue of being representative institutions. Parliaments, with their strategic mandate, can be mobilized to provide a legislative framework on climate change and also influence and monitor the implementation of climate change legislation and budgets. Mr. President, parliamentarians must also endeavor to ensure that the citizens, especially the women and girls they represent are consulted and included in climate change decision-making processes. Mr. President, I therefore welcome the proposal in the report to embrace progressive practice by encouraging national parliaments to set up caucuses or clubs that will promulgate and sustain the climate change discourse in the parliamentary fora. In conclusion, Mr. President, I wish to join the mover in thanking the Secretary General and her team for the excellent support rendered to the committee during the meeting, noting that without such support, the work of the committee would not have been successful. Mr. President, and I still second the motion, and I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I shall now allow debate on the motion. Members who wish to debate, please raise your hands and remember the time allocation. I start with a member from Zambia.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just to appreciate the mover of the motion on the floor, as well as the seconder from Namibia, Ebo seconded. I just want also to take this opportunity to add that I joined this committee, having been replacing Honorable Jeff Murewa from the Zambian Parliament, who has been doing an excellent job in this committee as I come in. Just a few submissions, Mr. President, as it relates to the effects of climate change, especially on women and girls. There's no doubt that women and girls continue to be the first, not only for many disease burdens, but also as it relates to climate change. I just want to add some of the things that Zambia is doing and that some parliaments also can emulate. And I'm sure we do have some similar challenges, especially when it comes to alternative energies that we need to use in our country. For example, in Zambia, there has been a lot of deforestation as it relates to the cutting down on trees. This has led to even our parliament, through our able Right Honourable Madam Speaker Nelly Muti, to really be a champion in planting trees so that we can try and mitigate the challenge that we have right now. For example, I am a member of parliament from one of the biggest constituencies in Zambia, which is nearly about 300,000 people. You'll be disheartened to note that in one night or evening when you are in the constituency, it won't be surprising that you meet about 4 or 5 trucks full of charcoal, and because people have no alternatives. So I think initiatives such as tree planting is very critical for our parliaments, especially those that are facing the challenges of climate change, and this will help our women and girls. In the same parliament, you'd love to know that Zambia went on to ratify the Paris Agreement in climate change, which was actually introduced in the House, but also the issue of domesticating, Mr. President, is very critical. And that is why the Parliament went ahead also passed an act which is called Disaster Management Act number 13 of 2010. And again, this is also to help because of climate change. There are a lot of floods which never used to take place, and there's a lot of hot seasons when it should be cold seasons. So the issue of also not just being signatories to these international treaties, but making sure that when we come in our given countries, we also domesticate our treaties and implement is very critical. Another addition that I want to add, Mr. President, in the interest of time, both the mover and the seconder did allude to the importance of having caucuses. I'd love to report that Zambia has been a little bit ahead in this area. We do have the Zambian Parliamentary Conservation Caucus, ZPCC, which actually we had a privilege even when the Deputy Speaker from the Democratic Republic of Congo visited Zambia. We had a meeting with them to see even how we can benchmark with them in the future because of some of the natural resources they have, but also how do we discuss about the challenges that we are facing and how do we make sure that we mainstream in gender. We also have gone on as a Zambian parliament to also have a committee on sustainable developmental goals in alignment to compensate, or should I say, to work together in harmony with the Zambian Parliamentary Conservation Caucus. And lastly, also just to add something that other member states maybe already have or can add, is the establishment of the two committees within the House of Parliament, and that is the Committee on Agriculture, Land and Natural Resources, as well as the Committee on Energy, Water and Development and Tourism. All these are some of the efforts as we try to mitigate the impact of climate change, and in particular on our women, our girls, who end up walking a lot of kilometers to draw water, and sometimes we have heard that some have been abused along the way because of the distances. With those few remarks, I wanted to add from the Zambian side. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I recognize a member from Botswana.
Thank you, Mr. President. I support the report and consider how climate change really affects women in general. Mr. President, women are really affected by climate change in Africa. Of Parliament from rural areas rely on agriculture to feed for their families. But climate change has really greatly affected output of agriculture produce, which women use to feed their children. In Botswana, mostly women in rural areas sustain their livelihoods and families through farming, and the government of Botswana assists them with seeds and fertilizers to produce food for their family. Even though climate change affects farming, the government of Botswana also assists with subsidies, especially during drought periods. They help with reducing prices of farming products. Women are more vulnerable compared to men on issues of health, especially those who are economically disadvantaged because they work under harsh weather conditions trying to feed their families. Even if it's raining, they have to go and fetch the wood for cooking. Even if it's cold, they have to do that. Those conditions, those bad weathers affect women health-wise. You know, women need lots of funding programs, especially for them to live or even for them to start their small business. Mr. President, if I take that advantage, that why I'm saying this is because in Botswana now we have got Ministry of Entrepreneurship, which should help the women to start these small businesses. The committee has talked about especially land. We know that especially youth, they have got difficulty, especially when application to have land or to have the structures to do their businesses. We know that women also, especially in rural areas, they fetch water in very far distances. So I support this report. So said, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I have a hand from Malawi. I recognize the member.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me first start by commending the mover and the seconder of the motion for a well-presented motion. Gender inequality remains one of the greater issues that has been affecting women development in Africa. Issues of climate change in the contemporary years are aggravating the same, especially in the SADC region. The responsibility of women in this part of the world remain very great, as it is the women who make sure that their homes are provided for with all the necessities they need. Mr. President, we know that our male counterparts are there just to put money on the table. We, the women, are the ones who decide what to use in the home. If the money is not enough or is enough, we are the ones to decide. Climate change, climate change compounded with environmental degradation has resulted in undermining the food production by women, a situation that is hampering the household food security in a way. Again, climate change compounded with environmental degradation has brought energy challenges for women in Africa, largely sub-Saharan Africa, where use of biofuels in terms of firewood and other related means is an order of the day. In Malawi, the climate change is triggering more erratic and extreme weather, resulting in chronic shortage of water, food, and financial insecurity for many. This situation is understandably common to a number of countries in the SADC region. In Malawi, 82% of the population live in the rural areas, and women account for 65% of smallholder farmers. This particularly makes them exposed to food insecurity. As we have already heard from the honorable member from Tanzania, that women grow women crops like veggies. And today I have learned something from her, that veggies are women crops. Climate change is not just an environmental issue, rather it also negatively affects social systems that aggravate inequalities. Thus, as much as everyone is affected by the wrath of climate change, the vulnerability of individuals varies depending on their gender, largely among others. SADC countries, therefore, should put women and the youth at the heart of all climate change interventions at both national and regional levels. Mr. President, I think time is now that we avoid statements like youth are the leaders of tomorrow. I attended this other meeting whereby someone said the future is women. Which future are we talking about? The time is now. We should stop making decisions for the youth without the youth. Stop making decisions for women without the women. Here we are, involve us in all steps of decision making. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, honorable member. I recognize the member from Namibia.
Chair, thank you. Just an observation. Now I'm a little bit tempted to the last statement. So, but just from a layman perspective and understanding, it's a small thing, but sometimes big misunderstandings come from issues we term to be small. When I was benchmarking, every report was having some kind of a gender approach, the mover and the seconder. But when you come to this one, you see that both mover and seconder are from one gender. Now, the moment you leave us behind as the perpetrators presumed. We are not going to understand to the level that we need to be understood. No, I'm not saying it's the case, but we need to move together in order to break the barrier. If you move ahead, we are still going to repeat the same thinking and mistakes that has caused the original problem. So as partners in living universe, I'm sure, and that is the question I wanted to pose, are the men there in the gender committee? Maybe it's the first question I should have asked. Are the men there? And why not the parity? As I said, we have all agreed the mover and the seconder was also gender sensitive since the thing started. I was not there in the planning, but that is what I've observed from a layman perspective. But on this one, it was evident that it was one gender. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I recognize the speaker from Tanzania, and I will close the debate with her intervention. Honorable.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I'll actually begin in the interest of time. I'll begin with the comment that has been made by Malawi that men put money on the table and women decide what to do with it. While I agree partly in the sense that even if there's little money, women can multiply it and make it food, but I don't subscribe to that statement because women put money on the table as well. Yeah. So I thought I should put that in that perspective. The other thing relating to this topic that is at hand, one of them. So, since the topic is talking about promoting gender and climate justice, we should be asking ourselves, how many female members of parliament do we have in our respective parliaments? If we have fewer than the world average, because right now, the world stands at 26.4 something percent. If we have lesser than those, we should be thinking of how we are going to increase the number of women in parliament for them to be there to talk about women issues, including climate change. Because if we mix the two, if you have fewer people, if you have fewer women in parliament, you will advance their issues. Yes, you can only hope that you will have men who are there for he, for she. Not less than that, you will never have anything decided in favor of these fewer number of women. So I think we have to learn from each other. Some of the parliaments in SADC are doing very well, and some of them are doing, not very well, but they are quite lagging behind. So those that are doing very well, let's learn from each other and then see how we can increase the numbers first, and then the rest will follow. I will go with a similar argument with the youth also in the parliament. Some of the parliaments, they keep increasing the number of age so that, even those who are advanced in age like myself can be in the youth caucus. So I think we need to really be sure of the age of these youth that we want in the houses. Why? Because we want them to be part of the decision-making processes like our colleague has just said. And I agree again with the Malawi speaker who spoke before the break that we need youth, we need presidents or chairs of the youth caucuses to also have a particular quota here in SADC-PF. That will also help their voices to be heard more. I will end with this comment, Mr. Chair, in the interest of time. The issue was raised here about men being part of this committee. It's true that we would want to see more women in the houses. We are not there yet. It's true we would want to see gender equity, gender equality. We are not there yet. So even now, if there are measures in place, even at SADC-PF, to address women issues separately, it's not a bad thing, because we are not there yet. So it's okay to have women discussing both, being the mover and the seconder. Why? Because we are not there yet. We are not there yet. So we are getting there, and we really need your support in that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I now call upon the mover, the Honorable Shali Josepha Raymond, to respond to the debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I'm very happy that I had 5 contributions from very powerful people in this House. I had a Deputy Minister, Dalita, from Botswana. I had our Honorable Vice Speaker, Deputy Speaker, Aisha, from Malawi. I had my own speaker, Dr. Tulia Ackson, Speaker of the House of Republic of Tanzania. I had Honorable Princess Kasume from Zambia, representing Jeff. Jeff was here before she joined his position, because Jeff is no longer with us, but in this committee, he was here. He was a champion, a very live champion and very active one. So I may say that I'm lucky to have all these strong contributions. I'm not here to repeat any of what was said, because you have listened to it and you have really agreed to what was said. I'm just thanking you people for being there. And now I'm requesting you people to go to or refer to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. If you may go to goal number 7, affordable and clean energy, and goal number 13, climate action. In short, those can summarize everything. We are supposed, all of us are supposed to see what we agreed to and if we are going to make it. In short, all the contributions were based on how to improve or how to cut the climate change. And may I say now, climate change is one of the most serious threats facing the world. Yet, most countries are still poorly equipped to deal with it. Perspective is therefore imperative when considering climate adaptation and strategies and funding priorities. Together with all that, I want to bold what my speaker, Honorable Tulia Ackson, just said, that we are fewer women than male in this. But I want to invite Honorable Katomeho from Namibia, who really jumped up to be a champion for gender this morning. So I really appreciate and thank you so much. And I'm inviting many more male to become champions. Without us, you are not there. We are your mothers, we are your sisters, we are your daughters. Please, male in this house, be champions within this house and in your own parliaments. Honorables, Mr. President, may I submit and thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now put the question that the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development, the report of the Committee of the Standing Committee on Gender Equality, Women Advancement and Youth Development on the role of parliamentarians in promoting the gender and climate justice agenda in the SADC region be adopted. Are there any objections? There being no objections, the report is duly adopted. Thank you. Honorable members, we have come to the conclusion of business for this morning while we are in the afternoon. For the first period. Before we rise, let me just read an announcement. The Speaker of the Parliament of the Republic of Tanzania, the Right Honorable Dr. Tulia Ackson, MP, is inviting all speakers and heads of delegation to a reception to take place today, 5th July 2023, at Lake Duluti Lodge on the outskirts of Arusha, starting at 1900 hours. Speakers and heads of delegation will leave together as a group from this hotel, Grand Milia, at 1830 hours. Thank you for that. We will rise to adjourn and we will resume at 1500 hours.